Hello, my name is Jay Carpenter. I'm founder of Desert Blockchain as well as DWeb Stewards project and the DWeb Camp directory, all of which are going to be discussed to some degree in this particular session. This is a session that we're holding at 8 a.m. on Thursday morning, August the 11th, 2022. And this is in preparation for the upcoming DWeb Camp 2022, which is a gathering of about probably 500 to 700 of the leaders in innovation and policy, governance, law, technology, and so forth in the Web3, DWeb space, decentralization, blockchain, Web5, all of these items. We have a community of folks that are coming together to spend about 5 days together to have some fun, to collaborate, to present on various topics, in particular on decentralized identity, privacy, controlling our own data. And this is a session that this session on the DWeb Stewards is designed to be the start of a conversation and the start of an experiment at DWeb Camp 2022 that is intended for 3 of the leaders in the legal realm to join us, and we have one joining us right now. I'm going to pause for just a moment and introduce her. I'm delighted that she's joining us. And I'll probably repeat a little bit of basically what I just started to say. So bear with me just a moment while she's connecting. And then we have one of the local Desert Blockchain folks, Michelle, who will be at DWeb Camp 2022, joining us as well. So, Primavera, you are connecting. And please let me know if you can hear me, and I'll let you know if I can hear you. And while she is joining, I'll start to do a little bit of an introduction on Primavera Di Felipe, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Primavera has been active in the DWeb community and is a world-renowned leader in governance and policy around blockchain, and is associated with the Harvard Berkman Center, and also another center which I'm not totally familiar with. Primavera attended the first DWeb Decentralization Summit at the Internet Archive in 2016. I believe she was also there in 2018. I don't think she made DWeb Camp 2019, but she is listed to attend DWeb Camp 2022. And Primavera, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Awesome. So hopefully you caught a little bit of this introduction, but I'm going to start over for your benefit, and I am so delighted you're joining us. Just to introduce you to the other folks, we have David McCarville, who is an attorney with Fenimore here in Arizona, and he also is a blockchain associate professor at Arizona State University, Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law. And we have Michelle Gaylor, who's with us as well, and she is participating in DWeb Camp 2022 as well. So, and Primavera, I have attended all 4, this will be my 4th DWeb Camp event or DWeb event, and I'm presenting this DWeb Stewards project as an opportunity for us to experiment with both ends of the spectrum in decentralized identity, covering definitive identity to approaching complete anonymity. So I'll articulate a few key points that I think will be of interest to some of the academics like yourself to take a look at this. And before I get started though, Primavera, do you have any questions of me before I go into a presentation?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, great, thanks. All right. So this is a presentation that I gave last week at the DWeb Camp session, talking about the projects for DWeb Camp. And I have started something called the DWeb Camp directory, which is part of this DWeb Stewards experiment and projects. So I'll talk about this just a little bit. This is a map. And David, can you see this okay? I'll assume that's a yes. Interrupt me.
That's yes, Jay. Thank you. I
Okay,
can't see
great.
it. Thank you.
So this is a 200-acre site of where we'll be gathering from the August 24th through the 28th. We expect about 500 to 700 participants from all over the world, many of which are experts in governance, policy, law, and technology. And these governance and policy issues, I think, are some of the most critical pieces for innovation that are on the table in order to move decentralization forward. And this is the DWeb Stewards is an opportunity to further explore that with a real life experiment that we can undertake. So the directory itself is intended to be used before, during, and after DWeb Camp. I'm not going to focus much on the directory, but the directory is sort of the key foundation for operating this Stewards program. And I'm going to skip this. It does focus on providing authenticated public keys so that we can connect with one another in the DWeb community and the people participating. We can encrypt and decrypt messages using public keys that have been authenticated by part of the sponsors and organizers of DWeb Camp 2022. And that's a private key, which is unsafe, has no passphrase. So don't use either of this public key or this private key. If you happen to see it, this is purely for instructional purposes and to be used as placeholders. So this starts to get into the DWeb Steward project and proposal. And what this is designed to do is explore the ends of the spectrum from near definitive identity to near complete anonymity. And I've been involved with identity for many, many years, stretching back into the 2000s in the telecommunications arena, and now since 2014 in the decentralization arena. And one of the things that I've noticed in the quest for creating workable decentralized identity is generally the focus is on creating something that creates near definitive identity. So for instance, with the DID spec that's been worked upon for about 5 years now in the W3C, they've created this lengthy specification for decentralized identifiers. And in my view, at least, it's really focused on the left side of the screen, which is near definitive identity. What has been overlooked, in my opinion, is creating something that's equally as important, which is near complete anonymity. And that is represented by, on the right, by this phone, which is an Android phone, which is a prepaid phone. And I'll show you exactly the roots of this device on the right that has DCD on it. But that is an Android phone that I paid cash for, and I gave zero information about myself. I didn't give my name. I didn't give an email. I didn't give a phone number. I walked into an AT&T store, laid down a certain amount of cash, and I was able to get that device on the right. And I think this is an opportunity to experiment with using these prepaid phones, sometimes called burner phones, but I'm going to avoid using that term. But I think this opens up an opportunity during DWeb Camp and after DWeb Camp, and possibly before, to experiment with how could we leverage these prepaid phones to create a choice for people. So I can have in one pocket my iPhone, which is near definitive identity. In my other pocket, I can have my Android phone, which I paid cash for, or somebody's paid cash for, which gives me at a moment's notice to switch between near definitive identity to near complete anonymity. So that sort of sets the stage. Here is the actual transactions that I engaged in to obtain the Android phone, which is the prepaid phone. I paid less than $100 cash. I bought the device itself at Walmart. I immediately walked into an AT&T store. I was able to create an account without giving my name, email address, any kind of identifying information other than perhaps a camera that was operational in the store. And at the time, I laid down $100 cash, got back $5 change. Total cost was about $95. And I walk out the door and I have a device that could be a vehicle towards creating a potential almost complete anonymous interaction with others. So here is the proposal for DWeb Camp Directory in Primavera. I apologize if I overstep my boundaries in using your image and so forth in the slide, but the shortness of time and me not knowing you directly, I took the liberty of doing that. But this is the proposal. The proposal is that 3 of the governance, policy, legal experts that are participating in DWeb Camp, each one of those 3 folks, if they're willing to participate in this, are equipped with 5 of these prepaid phones. And those 3 experts serve as prototype DWeb stewards. And I'll explain in a moment what that means and why I think it's very significant and an opportunity to really explore some important groundwork in data privacy, and decentralized identity. But basically, those 3 experts, subject matter experts, if they're willing, would then distribute these 5 Android devices that approach near complete anonymity to 5 of the participants at DWeb Camp 2022. I am setting up software and a platform using Twilio in the background that can start to track the usage of these devices. And then we collaborate with anybody and everybody associated with the DWeb community on this, if they're interested. And we see how this works, where we have these devices that many people use these devices now to operate in a approaching an anonymous fashion. So this is nothing new. What is new, though, is adding this extra layer of let's say, an authority or someone who acts as both a near close to the edge authority, authentication and authorization related to the 5 devices that they are under their oversight. And then we see how this plays out and what sort of dynamics emerge out of having this structure. So I'll talk a little bit more about why I think this offers a very rich opportunity for exploration after I stop slide sharing, but this is basically the proposal. Are there 3 subject matter experts going to DWeb Camp 2022 that are willing to take custody of 5 of these prepaid Android devices and then start to experiment with how other participants at DWeb Camp would use these devices and interact in a near complete anonymous fashion and context. So this is our session. This is some of the resources. That's just a little bit about me. I won't go into a lot of this, the extra collateral and material that I've got towards the end of this, but I did do a session on squaring Zuko's triangle that's related to this, and you can take a look at this at your leisure, but that's basically it. I'm going to stop the screen share and kind of open it up for questions and conversation at this point. So any questions before I would like to address why I think this is an interesting experiment that's different than people simply having a prepaid phone that where they can communicate, connect, and so forth in a fairly anonymous fashion. Any questions?
You mentioned Twilio. What is that exactly, and how does that play in?
That's a great question, Michelle. Thank you. So I've been in the telecommunications space for a long, long time. And it's my view that telephones and telephone numbering is considered pretty much a dinosaur. You know, making a phone call, and I'm the only one who does the gesture like this. I'm told that, you know, younger people do this when they're talking about making a phone call. Phone calls in general, in my view, are pretty much considered dinosaurs. And they, you know, making a phone call, if you just pick up the phone and make a phone call, it's generally considered like an interruption. And I would say frowned upon at this point. What Twilio does, Twilio is an incredibly robust platform that starts to bring contemporary functionality around telephones, telephone numbering, connectivity, and so forth, that offers a very rich feature set for text messaging, voice communications, conference connectivity, and video. And what I'm seeing is, I think there's a rich opportunity to really create some robust features, functionality associated with, you know, not only these Android devices and iPhone devices, but Twilio offers possibly something that could blend into the metaverse, where there's connectivity that brings a whole bunch of different pieces together, including Discord, WhatsApp, Slack, and all these disparate pieces that we use for our communications channel. I think Twilio offers a platform that can be easy to use, developer friendly, and start to unify a whole bunch of the disparate platforms that we currently use. Does that answer your question, Michelle? Cool. All right. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about what's on the table with this experiment. So in the realm of data privacy, there's generally an approach that focuses upon creating, in many cases, very punitive consequences for the centralized entities that are viewed as custodians or current stewards of our data. So GDPR, the California Initiative, and so forth are all intended to put safeguards, protections in place, and so forth for the centralized entities to eliminate our private data, handle our private data respectfully, and so forth. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's anything. What I do think out of this DWeb Stewards program is we now have, or this program could be the first step towards pushing that control out to us at the endpoints. So with these two devices, the iPhone and the Android, I think as this unfolds, people will see that this is an interesting alternative to relying upon GDPR and other centralized constructs to protect my data privacy. When I'm operating in a fashion, in a context where I want to be definitively identified, I can use my iPhone. When I'm operating in a context where I want to be in control of my data, my communications, and so forth, I can reach in my other pocket and I can operate with this Android device, which actually I might not even have bought using my cache. It might have been bought by the DWeb Steward, and the DWeb Steward in turn has provided this Android phone to me. And we both know, the steward as well as Jay Carpenter knows, that there's a new element of responsibility in this steward program. I would no longer be operating as somebody who, I'll use a metaphor, I'm operating with invisible identity. I'm no longer operating as a sole person out there with a device like this that I've paid cash for, where I think that I'm operating with near complete anonymity. Under the steward program, I know that my usage of this device has oversight by the DWeb Steward. And I think that creates a very powerful context that adds, it adds a different dimension to Jay Carpenter operating in a realm trying to protect my data privacy and control my data privacy. The other dimension that's really interesting, having played with this, that wasn't apparent to me at the beginning, is let's assume there are 4 other people that the steward has randomly given these devices to. Those other 4 people are now kind of related to me in our data and connectivity anonymity. Because what will happen if one of the 5 of us uses this device for some sort of nefarious purpose? We're all going to be suspect. And therefore, I have an interest in who the other 4 people are that are using this device under our respective DWeb Steward. So, in terms of how these devices could be allocated, I could imagine turning off these devices, putting them in some sort of like sack or bag or whatever, and each one of the 5 of us reaches in and grabs one of the devices and then turns it on when we want to operate with near complete anonymity. So interesting academic questions that arise in this structure is, should those 5 people, are they related? Do they know who the other 4 are? Could they be related? Could this be valuable in a company setting, or let's say a military setting, or a governmental setting, or in a journalist setting where it's very, very critical to operate with near complete anonymity? There's a whole host of questions that David McCarville and I have talked about prior to this regarding the legal and responsibility questions for the DWeb stewards. And I don't fully have the credentials to evaluate what the dimensions and considerations are for the potential DWeb stewards in their oversight of, let's say, 5 of these DWeb device, or excuse me, these DWeb steward devices. So that's a little bit of a long explanation, and I would like to kind of, get some conversation going, but I wanted to articulate some of those dimensions in this session, and just so that people start thinking about this and start exploring some of the dimensions that might emerge out of undertaking this experiment. So let me be quiet, and David, I'd really appreciate it, and Primavera and Michelle, obviously. Any questions you have, any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Jay. So I guess use cases for this would be for individuals who want to transact on the phone without having their identity known, like if they're somehow interacting with either DeFi protocol or some sort of protocol where they don't have a KYC AML compliance issue, some sort of open source protocol. Is that what you're envisioning?
Well, the realm could definitely encompass, financial transactions. More importantly, I think there's a genuine need for communication privacy, data privacy in various domestic situations, like spousal abuse, that sort of thing. One of the things that's come up in this investigation for me is a movie from 2020 called Invisible Man, and I was looking that up in on the Wikipedia page, because as I started to think about this is very much akin to putting on a cloak of invisibility, if that's a word. And so I started to look at the Invisible Man movie, and it turns out that's actually about spousal abuse, or partner abuse. So one end of the spectrum on operating with anonymity, I think, is giving people an option, a channel to connect, operate at certain times under certain contexts in a cloak of privacy. Now, let's see. Okay, Primavera has to jump off, and she says it's an interesting project. So thank you, Primavera, and I'm sure we'll follow up. And this is recorded and live streamed and all of that. So you know, that's one end of the spectrum where I think it's appropriate for data privacy. Another end of the spectrum, or another dimension, is in healthcare. There might be, you know, uses where doctor-patient confidentiality is critical, and this could be a very attractive alternative. In the realm of journalism, as we saw with the Jamal Khashoggi incident, communicating privately, not only you know, from the person who's using one of the handsets, the Android phone, but actually connecting with the other people, having them connect privately is also critical. Because what happened in the Jamal Khashoggi incident is not only was his iPhone compromised, but the people he was connecting with, their iPhones were compromised as well. So that's another use case. Certainly in government, military, you know, financial transactions. I don't fully know. I don't think we will be able to fully evaluate and assess the various realms of where this could be applied until we actually start to experiment with it. Does that answer your question, David?
Yes, thank you, John.
Any other thoughts about that? David? Michelle,
Oh,
go
Michelle
ahead.
has a question, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it wasn't a question so much. It's just, you know, the idea that you can keep part of your online identity pseudonymous. I mean, how many people have pseudonymous Twitter accounts? You know, that's sort of somewhere in between, you know, fully doxed identity and complete anonymity. And it gives people a sense of control over how much information they're presenting. I think that, you know, just, you know, not having a really good use for this, it still has a lot of appeal to, I think it would have a lot of appeal to a lot of people to be able to, you know, sort of control the level of identity that they decide to reveal at any given moment.
Right. And that's a great point, Michelle, because in the presentation, I identify 3 general levels. Number 1 is, I call it identity or definitive identity. Number 2 is handles, where you are operating under a pseudonym. And you can certainly, you know, for the DWeb camp directory, you can, and I bring this up to people when I talk to them when they're creating their listing, you can go out and get a prepaid phone yourself. You don't have to be part of the steward program. And then you can operate with everything under some sort of handle or pseudonym. But the steward program is a program where you've got somebody acting, and let's assume it's an attorney who's sort of your public face. And that offers some really interesting dimensions. And I think it also, as this is explored, will also offer some appeal to the authorities that are interested in, you know, providing protection for us, and are concerned about people communicating in a, you know, using prepaid phones that are hard to track. So I think there's some interest there. But let's go back to the spousal abuse case. If I was, you know, imagining that scenario, which is, I'm sure, a completely terrifying and horrible scenario where somebody's being, you know, they're in an aggressive situation, dangerous situation. The advantage of the DWeb steward serving as an oversight over this near complete anonymity is it offers a level of protection. Because if something happens to the person that's using the Android device that is basically prepaid and hard to track. The person using this knows that there's somebody else sort of overseeing the communications and so forth, so that if something happens, something tragic happens, there is somebody out there that could serve as a protection point, or at least somebody to raise the alarm that, hey, something has happened to the person that's using one of the DWeb Steward devices. So,
Hey Jay, that brings up an interesting point. Have you thought about using this as like a parental tool for minors who, maybe they don't want them to have, such a large footprint online, or at least maybe they want them to have the ability to be more anonymous in certain situations? I mean, it does seem like it might be a mitigating tool for stalkers or folks who are trying to exploit minors, or even adults who have maybe capacity issues, like vulnerable adults. We have a specific vulnerable adult statute in Arizona and the United States too as well, where they're oftentimes subject to predatory behavior. People are trying to exploit them for financial gain. So,
yeah, I don't know, David. That's a great point. I hadn't thought about it, but I think that's certainly a valid use case and something that could be explored. And that's part of bringing up this proposal is, how can this be utilized? And I think generally people, when they hear the term burner phone or prepaid phone or whatever, it's not tied to my real identity. They think of clandestine, dark web use cases and so forth. And that's part of this experiment is, can we look at the other side of the spectrum? Can we look at the use cases where there's a legitimate and really deep and fundamental need to operate in privacy, operate without having our real identities connected to our data and our communications and all that. And certainly, minor threats to minors, I think, is a valid use case that could be explored. I just saw a YouTube clip, and I don't know, I'm skeptical of all YouTube clips, but I know it is a problem. But basically, it was a video of these two fellows walking into a bar. One of them distracts a woman who's at the bar. The other one puts some sort of drug into her drink, and the next thing you know, they're carting her out of the establishment. That's definitely a perilous situation. I don't know how this, dual definitive identity to almost complete anonymity, device carry with somebody overseeing, possibly both devices, who knows? But I think that's definitely a real threat. And I think it's another threat model and scenario that could be explored, with this structure. Does that make sense?
yes, it does. Thank you.
So let me talk a little bit about the financial model on this, because I think this is really important. I think what's coming up in this conversation is surfacing a lot of important and socially valuable use cases. And that's great. But for this to really have powerful and sustainable dimensions and dynamics behind it, I think there has to be some sort of business model associated with it. And that is part of what can be tested with this DWeb Stewards model. Because I think that, especially if you're going to engage a professional like an attorney who might be taking on some sort of professional liability and risk and so forth, there has to be compensation. And that is part of what I think can be explored with this model. And I don't know how that's going to play out. I don't know what the price points might be, what the value propositions might be, but I do want to bring it up in this initial introduction that this is intended to be more than just an altruistic endeavor. It's intended to explore some monetization streams that can assure that there is longevity to this project, that the project can be scaled, that there are resources associated with taking this on and rolling it out, getting adoption, getting professionals to embrace this, getting the public to embrace it, getting groups like the organizers of DWeb Camp 2022 having some sort of revenue stream associated for them as well. In incorporating a program like this, I think is very important. And my sense is that it's understandable if people resist some sort of monetization mechanism associated with their privacy. People feel that their privacy is a right, and I understand that. And this doesn't preclude other ways to protect your privacy. This is in no way considered to be some sort of something against the centralized data protection initiatives that are in place by Europe and California and so forth. This is simply an alternative. I don't know how this is going to shake out, what will work in terms of what is viable, what's not viable, what's socially acceptable, what's not socially acceptable. This might be very controversial, I don't know. All I'm suggesting is that the whole intention around DWeb Camp 2022 is to bring together what I consider to be the top people in the world that have a genuine passion in areas like data privacy and decentralized identity. So this is simply a proposed project that can be launched very simply. Go out and get 15 prepaid Android phones, get them provisioned, give 5 of those prepaid phones to subject matter experts like Primavera, if she's interested, and I don't know that she is. But, it's an experiment that I think is doable. And I've reached out to some of the folks at Twilio, and I don't know if they will, collaborate on this project or not. And I'm not saying that, Twilio is the only solution. We've certainly got connections with Matrix. I've got connections with SignalWire, and there are other platforms that might be interested in this in terms of the back-end telephony and technical capabilities. But this is an opportunity for various entities, various parties to start to look at something with an open mind, with a collaborative spirit, and let's take a look. Let's see if we can uncover both the pros and the cons of this. How could this be applied? So that's essentially, the value of this particular session, and I appreciate, the three of you participating. And I know there are others that expressed interest in this that because of time zones, whatever, cannot. But that's the proposal. And the question is, what can we create? And I'm basically taking it on as sort of the coordinator of this, as well as providing some of the back-end infrastructure. And I ask anybody who's watching this, anybody that hears about this, that's interested, you can reach out to me. My contact information is part of the slide deck, including my email address and my telephone number. And what is in the notes below this YouTube is a link to the slide deck and so forth, so you can reference it that way. In terms of a follow-up session, I will see what the response is once I circulate this recording and get some further feedback. We might very well have another session next week, and let's assume that we do on Thursday, the 19th, and is it the 19th or the 18th? Excuse me, the 18th. Excuse me just a second. I'm doing a lot of talking. I needed a drink of water. So, I don't see any comments in the YouTube chat, but let's assume we're going to have another session on Thursday, I think it's the 18th at the same time, 8 a.m. And I'm just going to put that out there for consistency on this, because I would like to get this started, if possible, prior to DWeb Camp, so we can set up the, some of the monitoring infrastructure associated with these, include listings in the DWeb Camp directory, set up the DWeb Stewards and the DWeb directory stewards. And I have been cautioned that there are space stewards, so I don't want to confuse the terms with the organizers of DWeb Camp. But basically, I think we could get started on this project immediately. And I do think that the project can extend beyond the event itself from August 24th to the 28th. And, assuming it has merit, we could continue it into future DWeb camps and so forth. So anyway, that's a long-winded explanation from me. Michelle, David, any other comments, questions?
No, thank you, Jay. Appreciate your time and effort on this. And good luck next week.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, David. We can go ahead and wrap this up. The recording is available on YouTube immediately. However, there is a long trailer at the beginning, which I'll edit out probably tomorrow. But the YouTube recording is public, and this will be on the Desert Blockchain YouTube channel. So thanks, and appreciate your time and your attention. And please let me know if you're interested in participating.